Welcome to my cellar. Couple things you should know. I'm starting this on 420. This weekend, when you see this on Saturday, I'll be in Fort Lauderdale for 2 days, 2.5 days. My wife and I are going down to visit our son and daughter-in-law and grandson. So, it was 85 here today in Cincinnati, so God only knows what it'll be in Florida. Or they could have another 20 inches of rain thing. Okay, let's go. I remember back in 1981, being 11, my little brother being 9 years old, introducing new people to the hobby. First words out of our mouths were, your character has a good possibility of dying. Your character might lose everything your character worked for in levels and wealth, so don't get upset. We're not trying to screw you over. We only had one kid get so upset about a character death that his mother called our mother to complain. Technically, the kid's character was not dead, just turned to stone, and was mad he had to play one of the hirelings until the players could get a stone-to-flesh squirrel. Well, damn, what a precious little flower he was. Told his mom, huh? No, it's good. The overall statement is good. You only had one that got freaked out about it, and that's the way it should be. Great rewards, great hazards, great risks. Thanks for the vid. Glad you finally tested negative, and you're looking more spry this week. Yeah, but I wish I could. I don't have the stamina back yet. Anyway, this semester I started a high school D&D club and was pleasantly surprised to have nearly 20 kids initially and almost as many interested since. This week we launched a fundraiser campaign, and with the help of Twitter and Ginny D, we've already raised nearly $2,000 to buy dice, paints, minis, and more. From one educator to another, what lessons or advice might you impart as I develop this club? The club is okay, I don't want to identify the club because that might then identify the poster. Well, I'm really interested to see that you have paints and minis there. Now, as I've made clear many times, I don't have to have minis to play. However, as an educator, the tactile and visual comes into play here. And the artistic side has a chance to mellow, and somebody might find their niche, and wow, man, I can paint minis. I cannot paint anything big. I can put myself on a kite shield or on just a regular triangular sort of shield of a medieval 25mm soldier. I can print a castle with 4 towers and a keep. I can paint it. But that's only because it's just a few lines suggesting whatever. I can't do it otherwise. But even that, not to brag or anything, but even that is a skill that people might realize. You can also, if you get 2 or 3 that are interested in painting, watch them start to collaborate and share ideas, and encourage that. A mini of their own infuses some of their blood into the character. So when you're teaching, and newbies and that, I'm all for them. Just because I don't need them doesn't mean that, I don't see that they're fun, and they give the players at the table a focus. And I've actually run some games where players brought their minis and put them up and put them around the raft they were rafting on at the time and whatever, and it kept them focused and themselves within the group consciousness. So that's a neat thing to do. Dice, well, I know we all go nuts on dice. Don't go overboard with dice. Actually, what I would recommend is only getting a few sets of dice and therefore encouraging the others to get their own. There's sets there. They can be passed around to those who don't have them. That's the way we did it at my table when there weren't any dice to speak of. Back in the 74, 75, I had the only set, and it got passed around, and whoever needed it, and they, a couple sets, 5 sets, whatever, so that it's not a hindrance not to have them, but see who starts talking about, asking about buying their own. That's a commitment to the game, and in my my heretic's mind, a good thing. Another convert. Now, when you say more, minis and more, spend your money wisely. Go with minimalism. Make the imagination do most of the work. I love Stefano's Dwarven Forge stuff, but that is not what I would recommend for a learning group. That can become a distraction. Make them play inside their heads. They can focus on their figure, and all that. Before figures were available, okay, the party's all the black dice, and the kobolds are all the orange dice, and that was only for spatial references. We were all learning how to play in our head. After a while, we didn't even need to do that, and as a DM, I didn't need it. Okay, admittedly, a very pedantic point regarding the Tolkien half-elf thing. If I remember correctly, then this comes up just about once or twice in Silmarillion. Elven and human offspring are very rare. They are not really an amalgamation between the two races. They choose at some point as to which race they want to continue their life. Right, I got you. She chooses Aragorn, she becomes. But that's Tolkien, period. Tolkien doesn't he doesn't negate min-maxing, because he wrote all that long before there was a game. Okay. Therefore, Tolkien actually says no min-maxing, one or the other. Can't have the best of both. All right, there's more on this. There were at some point a few half-elves running around, and the Valar got tired of it and said, okay, you've all got to pick sides here. There's more. I never had anything against halves in D&D. However, at one point early on in my settings development, a player made a character who was a half-orc samurai. I didn't have orcs in my setting at the time, and I didn't have a samurai culture in my setting either. So, long story short, that player's decision turned half-orcs into their own species. Those pages in the player's handbook got their own name and culture in my setting. Okay, now, I'm going to say a few things here. And I never mean to offend in most cases, and this is not a case where I mean to offend. However, you don't have orcs in your setting? Well, he can't be one. You don't have samurai in your world? He can't be one. Period. I would caution all DMs establishing a setting / campaign / world. Be consulted as to, tell your players, all right, you bring to me what you think you want to be. And half orc? Nope, can't, sorry. That's like saying you want to be half weasel. Nope, sorry, doesn't work in my world. Might work in a post-apocalyptic world. It might. Mutant Crawl Classic, they might have half weasels. But I'm scolding a little. Don't let something into your campaign that you don't want there, or that you didn't either put there or allow to be within your campaign. Don't. It's your world. half-orc samurai. Get real. Yeah, I've read a few good books about orcs and making them much more sympathetic characters and all that, but not in my world. And we're going to talk a little more about my world later. All right. This is a rather long question, and it in some way goes into some of the problems I see with the later editions. I'd like to talk about flanking. I've used that thing in some of my 5e games, gain a +2 to attack rolls against a flanked enemy. However, I suggested this to another group and was given a whole lot of negativity from a single player about me trying to kill my players, implying that the player should be winning all the time. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Big flag. Whee! Big warning bell should be going off in your head. This guy's probably going to be a problem. Nowhere in any of the forewords of any of these books have I seen anything about players should be winning all the time. That's his perfect, nice little Nancy world. Nancy and Sluggo. Everything always goes. No. First problem. All right, let's see. I've tried to make it more balanced since there's a trait called pack tactics that can be found from 20 or so monsters in the game, which gives advantage to allies within 5 feet of the enemy. 2d20 and take the highest. I am seeing now that I'm not even sure what any of this kind of crap is. All right, so I'm going to skip over some of this. I played with this player before, and it's not the first time something like this happened. Last time I said no magic at first level. He had a lot to say about that. Eventually, he convinced me to give them magic items. And what a mistake I did. Right. This person is toxic if you allow him to be. Second time, I'd have taken him aside after the game and said, look, okay, here's the way it's going to be. And I'd lay down my table rules and my world rules as appropriate. If he didn't like it, sorry. You know, you should be having fun. If you can't have fun under my restrictions, sorry. I don't have fun dealing with you and your grandiose schemes. Sorry. Let's see. Back to the point. 5e's DMG has the optional rule of flanking as an advantage, but I'd use it as a 2 or 1 bonus. Okay, flanking in hand-to-hand combat, crap. Flanking is a term best used on tabletop in doing army battles, or at least skirmishes, because there a flank means something. In a swirling melee of hand-to-hand combat, in my opinion, flank is a superfluous term. I have always run my combat, always. When I was at Lake Carbondale, when I was at Lake Geneva, I've always run my combat as a dance, a swirling. You don't, unless the bad guys single you out for one-on-one, there is no singling out by the player characters. Not in a big, wild melee. It may come down to that as the foe is whittled down. But if a party of 6 is harassed by 15, 16 goblins, all right, probably not something that's going to pose a great problem. Did you hit something? All right, they rolled a hit. Did you hit? Fine. I'll pick at random which you wanted hit. I keep track behind the screen, so to speak. I keep track. And when they start dropping, oh, that's the 5th one down. There's 11 left. And some of them are pretty beat up, and some of them are untouched. Because that's the way it happens in a wild hand-to-hand combat like that. But you shouldn't have let him twice tell you what your world was going to have. Shame on you. How would I handle the dungeon crawl encounter where the delvers stumble upon two groups of monsters fighting each other? Well, and then it goes on to say, let's say that all three parties are aware of each other. What metric would you use to determine how the monsters behave when the delver party arrives at the scene? Well, there's a lot of assumptions being made here. It would seem to me that a party of explorers, PCs, game players, are going to be a little more circumspect and cautious than a pack of monsters who feel they own the place. If two groups of monsters start fighting each other, I would assume it's going to make a hell of a racket. I would further assume that the party is going to have a chance to hear that hell of a racket. If they get down there and they see it all going on, they then have a choice to decide to join one side or the other, or to try to slaughter them both, or let them fight down to the last couple and then slaughter the survivors. I mean, they have an infinite supply of choices of what they can do. If, bad luck, one of the two parties of monsters by some means or other detects maybe one of the player characters was clumsy and kicked something, whatever, well, now you got a whole new dynamic, and that's up to you based on the circumstances at that instant. If the two monster groups had just started, it would be much more likely that one or both of them would become interested in the easier prey. If they had been heavily engaged for some time, it's very likely, I would say in my world, it's very likely that they will go unnoticed, particularly if they're downwind, et cetera, et cetera. If they're stealthy and sneaking and creeping, they would go unnoticed. Then what I would expect the party to do is wait to see how it goes, and then either step in to help one side or the other. Because I'm taking the term monster, meaning anything that isn't a player character or an NPC. Doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's evil, doesn't mean it wants to eat you. They may have a reason to jump in. That's how I'd handle it. All right. What else? In regards to maps and mapping, this is something I do more than anything else with my RPGs. Perhaps because of a misspent youth poring over the Hobbit map. Regardless, I'm also very lazy. So the advice I give is constantly is this. There are loads of maps just out there for free in the world. There are fire safety maps, store layouts, other such maps just hanging on the walls. I snap a picture, print it in black and white, trace out the floor layouts. Voila. The way to build up a library of maps, and guess what you can do? The same thing with area maps, using maps printed from Google Maps of your local area. I'm in the process of converting my local town into one at the moment. Yep. And not only that, there's bunches of people on social media that produce beautiful maps once a week, once a month, whatever, and give them away. And not only that, if you're in a bind, 20 minutes, it's all coming down bind, there's generators out there. You can go to a dungeon generator, tell you want 7 rooms, yada, 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 and have it generate 4 or 5 and use the one you like. Don't let mapping hang you up. I find it much more fun myself to look at a map and then decide what it's telling me, what's where, what's in it, etc. I find that a lot of fun and very challenging. But many people love to meticulously, like a draftsman or an architect, lay it out. That's fine. I've been down that road too. All right. Now we're getting into intuition. Apparently it's important to some people. Part of the challenge, especially at some tables, is a distinction separation of the character from the player. For a character that in effect has mental capabilities higher than those of the player playing said character, the usefulness of something to enable a means to show character's ability to perceive, intuit, persuade, intimidate, just as for the purposes of the game. The physical stats enable a player to assume the role of an individual who is physically stronger, dexterous, or endurant than themselves. Okay, yeah, I'll concede that. The physical stats do that. I don't recall in any of the tables at Lake Geneva or any of the older tables I played at that we ever had a problem with that. If a guy was playing a big brawny fighter with a low intelligence and he tried to do something, the DM would go, nah, you're not, you aren't clever enough to figure that out. Or your character, it was never directed at the person sitting behind the piece of paper. It was directed at referencing the character. You do the same thing for somebody with a really low charisma, which back in the early days we considered a low charisma somebody who had bad BO, poor toilet habits, poor shaving habits, was enormously ugly, misshapen. Any of those things could play into a low charisma. When somebody tried to charm somebody or smooth talk somebody with a really low charisma, I would remind them, nah, they're not buying it from you. Why would they trust you? And remind them that they're limited in that area. There's ways you can do it. As evidenced by previous questions, if you got a prima donna in your group, well, too bad for the prima donna. Okay, now, could somebody figure it out? Could they intuit it? All right. Many time, we of the old school dice throwers would roll a 20 to see. And so the guy with the 10 intelligence gets a really high roll. He exceeds his intelligence by 5 or 6 points, we'll say. He figured it out. Cool. I don't know. I guess that's the same thing. Sort of. The result's certainly the same. And I like the way it works better. I don't like doing things by die roll. That's coming up more later here. All right, whereas a group may set a ground rule, the players really shouldn't try to play characters whose abilities are beyond their ability to role play. That sort of edict can lead to trouble and arguments, especially when it comes to the mental realm of character/player. Imagine the uproar or offense that could rise from a GM or players arguing against another player having a mage character because the actual player isn't considered smart enough. Okay, we're going. That's enough. Your point's made. Druids, fighters, whatever. Part of the enjoyment of a fantasy game or other games is the adoption of characters that are different, whether better or worse, from the player. As for the point on the mixed heritage half-elves, there were half-elves and half-trolls in Norse sagas, right? Sagas. even less reliable than quoting Tolkien. As much as I respect and revere the sagas, They're oral traditions that were passed down for a long time before Snorri wrote them down. Yeah, you can't be a bard or a paladin because you're not likable enough. Well, there's people I can think of for that. And then there's Anderson's Broken Sword. It has a Norse half troll, and Gavion Merlin. And then they go. Not to mention the biggest mixed heritage character of all, demigods like Hercules or Perseus. Fine. They're a demigod. A demigod. I, for one, am not going to sit down at a table where I have to dungeon master for a bunch of demigods, unless they're all demigods and we're off raiding some Taiwanese Buddhist heaven. No offense to the Taiwanese or the Buddhists, just saying some, very metaphysical, very specific, no. No. They're demigods. And then, here's a weak argument. Spock. Well, Spock's sci-fi, isn't he? Spock is sci-fi. We're fantasy. I think the issue here is a tax of opportunity on the argument front, regardless of size. However, one proposed solution, just being cosmetically different version of one of the parents, isn't that great because it, whether intentionally or not, emphasizes a person, character, of mixed heritage to, for lack of better term, pick a side. Well, pick a side. If the Valar made them pick a side, you pick a side. And by doing so, you could further foster positive self-image and self-esteem. Well, okay. I could foster self-esteem in any character they chose to play. As for half-orcs, I'd say it's based on what that setting's table games arcs are like. A lot of the older examples are much more monstrous. However, if power to them, a GM basically describes a female orc to be more or less look like spectacular She-Hulk with little tusk, I think there may be some PCs or even players who would definitely say she'd be in their wheelhouse. And then he goes on to a ribald joke, which I won't repeat for fear that I might offend. Well, any ladies listening to this. She'd be in their wheelhouse or cockpit. Sorry. Couldn't resist the opportunity for a ribald joke. No disrespect. And from the use of the word ribald, I would venture to guess that this person might be from the UK. It's not it's a wonderful word. It's just not one we see very often in American English at all. I, too, am not interested in using halfers anymore, as I've come to think of the demi-races as something completely different from mankind. But I'm also a firm believer that it's the DM's decision as to who or what inhabits his campaign and how they came about to be there in the first place. Who's to say half-orcs, for example, have to be crossbred with humans and could be just a different tribe of orc, or maybe they're constructed like a golem by a wizard to guard his tower and left long ago after he died. It's even possible they simply spawned out from a pool of bubbling mud. Well, yeah, Tolkien did that. The gods only knows why. As the Little Brown Books taught me long ago, just give me the basics and I'll figure out the rest. And that is the essence of the Little Brown Books. Give me the basics. I'll work it out. Thank you. All right, here's another comment on intuition. I recently ran a Star Wars game. There was no skill like intuition, and they were interrogating someone. One of my players asked me, "Can I roll to see if I believe him?" And I said, "No. Ultimately, it's up to you if you think he's being truthful or not. Having a magic ability that always tells you when someone is being deceptive really can derail events." I agree fully. It makes him immediately more suspicious of everyone because the game encourages that suspicion and it nullifies the game master's role-playing. If an NPC is sly, manipulative, and a practiced liar, then they aren't going to have a hard time pulling the wool over your eyes until you learn that they're doing that. At the same time, a nervous NPC caught in the act might try and bluff their way out of the situation, but when they're sweating and their eyes are searching all the room, it should be pretty clear that they're not being totally honest. Good point. I completely agree that intuition should be an aspect brought to the table by the player. Oh, he agreed with me in this case. I jumped over that phrase. I have seen a trend in many newer 5A players, not all, to feel that almost all aspects of the game should be resolvable by dice roll. If you lean into this, it becomes questionable as to how much role play is left. I believe in role playing, R-O-L-E, not role playing, R-O-L-L. Me too. No one's fun is wrong, that's right. So if you want every aspect of your game resolved by a die roll, so be it. I just think, my opinion, that at some point you'll begin to rely on dice rather than your own skills as a role player. I agree very heartily with that. Relying on dice dulls your senses. Dulls your senses. Out of curiosity, have you thought about doing a gazetteer series for your home RPG setting, much in the general vein of the known world Mystara stuff for the back of me D&D game? Perhaps something custom system agnostic for the plethora of editions, old school engines, and whatnot that various tables may prefer. Nothing necessarily at the big page count like the aforementioned BECME products, but something in a serial sort of format to focus on a region group aspect of the setting. No, I don't want to do a gazetteer. Yes, I've already written big chunks of gazetteer. Back when I started writing on Dragon's Foot thread, I wrote a lot of background of what and how my world worked. When I wrote Onto the Devil's Skillet, I wrote a ton of history of my world in the various ages and the various oppressions and cycles and whatever that had gone on over centuries. And I'm sort of half-assed in the project of collecting it all together and seeing what I have there. Because I wrote bits and pieces here and there for different adventures and that, because they all take place on my world. So, yeah, one of these days I'll find some bright young amanuensis who begs for the privilege of going through my notes and finding all that stuff. You like that's going to happen. Interesting question, though, but no. In 1980, I had a college roommate who was so upset when his druid was eaten by a purple worm that he rolled up that character's brother and went on a quest to track down the worm, cut out the partially digested body parts, and get him resurrected. Our first DM told him to let him do all that, but when his tracking led him to a giant pile of unresurrectable purple worm poop, and say that fast 3 times, he quit the game. Well, that's too bad. I don't know what he was bitching about. My first magic user in the same campaign lasted 2 whole sessions before he got bitten, but for 3 hit points by a giant rat. Yeah, nothing like having 2 points and have a rat bite you. I'm dead. I remember that happened in an early game down at Carbondale. What do you mean? A rat bit me and I died. Well, gave you more hit points than you got. I think it's great to go out on a quest and try to have them resurrected and all that kind of stuff. But hey, if a sufficient amount of time had passed between the ingestion and finding it, that it could be naturally assumed that nature had taken its course. Sorry. There's no guarantees in any life, let alone game life. And someone responded, I believe that the Druid could have been resurrected by a wish spell. Yeah, if you use wish spells. I hate wish spells for some more reasons that I'm going to go into tonight. Nevertheless, the DM's making it that difficult has me thinking the relationship between the DM and player was unhealthy. Some kind of sadism, bullying, etc. going on, I expect. I reckon it was a healthy move for the player to quit that game. Well, I think I know who this is, and I believe there was some sibling and cousins involved in the group. And nobody can be more vicious to each other than siblings and cousins. So maybe it was. But then again, as long as they followed a logic, passage of time, digestive, yada, 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 I can't fault him. Don't like wishes. Don't like wishes. Don't like wishes. Hate wishes. Gary could crock a wish faster than any human being I knew. Crock being a term we used to use for twisting the meaning of or subverting the intention of something like that. One last thing, because I got to get to bed sometime here. I'm flying tomorrow. I hate flying. Oh, God, I hate to fly. Oh, how demeaning. I feel like a sheep being led down the chute. They're either going to hit me with a bolt gun in the head or shear me when I get to the other end. Neither process, which I'll enjoy. In any event, our paper being the paper for the cardstock for the D20 Delving game, is held up in customs in Detroit and has been for some time now. And the man went up and talked, Don, went up and talked to customs people in Detroit and spent a whole day trying to clear it up. And it appears that also in that container there was contraband. No idea what it was. 10,000 containers there on the dock. And they had to be in ours. Or another way to look at it, 10,000 containers who never get inspected, except a few, and ours was one of them, and it had some in it. It wasn't our paper, the customs is aware of that, but still, no printing the cards, no finishing the assembly of the game. I'm sorry. All right, I guess that's it. You'll be seeing this on Saturday. I'm flying out on Friday and returning on Monday, so that won't have any effect. All right, I guess I'm just finishing out my itinerary in my head. There's conventions going on all over around the country right now. Try to get to a local con. If they're playing a game that you think you like, or that you know that you like, and you hope they'll have a version of it you like, go. You meet new friends, you get out of the house, you get exposed to new types of gameplay, new ideas in gameplay, especially something as interpretative as RPGs. Go. Treat yourself. It's getting into the good weather for traveling. Doesn't have to be giant. I won't go to Gen Con anymore. It's too enormous. I wouldn't dream of going to Gen Con anymore. The only way I go to Gen Con is if they gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award. Then I'd go and I'd have an escort so I could get through the hall. I drive over for one day because I'm only an hour and a half from Indianapolis. I'm not flying to Texas anymore. I'm going to miss all my friends down in Texas. Not going anywhere until Game Hole. Oh, I got to tell you a story about Game Hole. Every year, Alex Kammer has a plushie made of various monsters. And they've had a Boule and a Mimic and some really great ones. Displacer Cat. Well, the last one that I got was a Flumph, 7 legs and 2 eye stalks. And I have 2 cats that are about 10.5 months old right now. And a couple of months ago, they discovered it still in its heavy plastic bag. And they chewed hundreds of little holes in the plastic bag. And I thought it was a plastic bag they wanted, because both these cats chew weird shit. So I took the Flumph out, gave them the plastic bag, put the Flumph down on the table, jumped up and got the Flumph. Love that thing. Wife calls it their lovey. They take it around to whatever level of the house we're in. If we're down in the family room, they bring it down there. If we're upstairs in the living room, it's upstairs. They put it up in the bedroom every night. Go figure. A blue fluffy. A Flumph, of all things. Anyway, Dododagawi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
The curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory, Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.